You're listening to a Brain Stew Fresh Fright review.
What's up, creeps, and welcome to another Epic Film Guys Fresh Fright review. I'm Justin.
I'm BluBrry.
And on this episode, we're going to be talking about the third installment in Ty West's recent horror trilogy. We had X, we had Pearl, and now it's finally time for MaXXXine. 3 X's, by the way. XXX. Because it's bad, baby. We had the opportunity to see a early screening of MaXXXine, and we're actually recording this the day after to get this out into your ears as soon as possible. We have the big holiday coming up next week. We have 4th of July, so we're going to try to pump out as much content as possible for you guys out there so you can enjoy the holidays while listening to some EFG in your fucking eardrums. But our good buddy, our co-host Jeremy, unfortunately could not make the screening last night. He was supposed to go, he was gonna go, he was wanting to go, and things came up, so we're rolling as a duo on this one. But be ratty, you know, we've talked about the other 2 movies. We've talked about X. We had on Joe for Movie Dumpster for that one, and of course, you know, we did Pearl. So in retrospect, you know, we've all kind of collectively really enjoyed those movies. How much anticipation did you have for MaXXXine?
I had a lot for this one. You know, I've said it in other episodes. I think I said it in the last one we did for In a Violent Nature. I felt that most horror movies this year so far, you know, have not been predominantly bad. They've just been passable. You know, they've been fine. There hasn't been anything that's really grabbed me or wowed me. And I kept waiting for MaXXXine, right? Like, that's been something that's on our radar. You go back to our episode where we did our lists for this upcoming year, or the year we're in now. MaXXXine is on there. And,
absolutely.
You know, on a side note, you know, Longlegs is just in a couple weeks, and so, you know, we've had this anticipation for these 2 movies in the summer, MaXXXine being the first. And I love X. You know, I think that Ty West just struck gold with that one, and it's not like it's his first time. You know, House of the Devil was great. I like The Innkeepers a lot. The Sacrament was good, but you know, X is really where he perfected time and place. You know, like he can really cement you in whatever era he's shooting. And as somebody who loves Texas Chainsaw, loves those gritty 70s movies, it was great for me. Pearl was just a completely different type of movie, which I'm sure we'll get into in this review, but also fucking fantastic. So I was like, well, you know, he's 2 for 2. MaXXXine, there's no way he's gonna let me down, right? So I went into this with a lot of high expectation and a lot of high hopes.
I understand that. I totally agree. I think he had 2 home runs. Obviously, people's feelings on Pearl may have varied because it wasn't the traditional horror film as we normally would consider, but I loved it. I loved both of the movies, and depending on the day, I would say I like one or the other better, but they've both been home runs. So when you're approaching a 3rd movie in a series of any kind, trilogy or ongoing, there's going to be a lot of pressure. There's going to be a lot of pressure in terms of Ty West, the filmmaker, to deliver on something he thinks is going to satisfy, you know, the collective audience that's been following this so far. I mean, both movies were hits, both very successful, both critically pretty well done in terms of, you know, reactions and such. So I think there was a lot on his shoulders and a lot weighing on this movie, and especially for A24 as well. I was really head over heels excited for this. The 80s is my favorite era of everything. Fashion, music, movies. It's just literally part of my heart and soul, my being. I live it and breathe it every fucking day. So, and this looking like it's a huge throwback to the Brian De Palma era of thrillers and the giallos and the early slashers. It really just looked like it was going to wet my whistle. So leading up to that, I mean, I didn't go back and rewatch Pearl or X. I'd watched them both a handful of times over the last few years, so I didn't feel it was necessary. Did you rewatch either leading up to this?
I had rewatched X a couple weeks ago. It was on Netflix, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I haven't seen this in a while." And it still holds up just as well as it did the first viewing. And then Pearl, yeah, I don't know that I've seen that since it first came out. I think I watched it in theaters twice, and then I watched it once at home. So yeah, I after watching X, I was like, "Don't watch Pearl," just because I was like, "Let me go into MaXXXine fresh,"
Oh, I agree. It makes a lot of sense because, continuity wise, it, connects to this.
Mm-hmm.
This is 1985. And, we might as well get right into the synopsis. So those that are unaware or uninitiated on what this movie is, first and foremost, this will be a full spoiler review. So it's very likely we're not going to have enough time to do a, non-spoiler and then come in with a full spoiler for you guys as a separate episode. So we're just going to give you all the good, gory goodness now. But if you don't know what this movie is and you're like, hey, I'll listen to them at least explain what it is before I shut them off, Brady, enlighten them, please.
Sure. So, like we said, this is the third movie of Ty West's trilogy that started with X, then Pearl. Now we're on MaXXXine, and it takes place in the 1980s Hollywood. Adult film star and aspiring actress MaXXXine Minx finally gets her big break. But as a mysterious killer stalks the starlets of Hollywood, a trail of blood threatens to reveal her sinister past. Ty West is back. Mia Goth is back. I think it's a fucking fantastic supporting cast in this movie. Just name recognition alone. So I thought that was a huge draw too. I was glad to see him pull those names in for this final movie.
Absolutely. Great cast. Great setup. That premise alone just makes me wet. Oh my God. Please and thank you, Ty West. Especially considering that he's really the guy. We talked about this a little bit, before and after we saw the film, that if there's anyone to do a period piece, especially the 80s, it's him. He nailed the 70s with X. He nailed the period in Pearl. He's very accurate in terms of what he presents, the setting, the costumes, the vibe of everything, the way the films are shot, every single thing about it. Even the acting corresponds with that particular era. So, I mean, and I'll come right out and say, with this movie, lock and step, he follows suit with MaXXXine from X and Pearl. All of the technical aspects of this movie are absolutely brilliant. He nails the 80s better than I feel like anyone else I've seen attempt to do in a very, very, very long time. The camera work, I mean, I can't say for sure because I don't know. It looked like it was shot on 35 millimeter to me. There were many scenes where there was film grain. I hope and pray that it wasn't one of those things. Knowing Ty West, I don't think he would do like the fake film grain or anything like that. No. He's a film purist, so it looked like it was shot on film. It felt like it, and in every single second of the movie, I felt like I was watching a movie from the 80s. It didn't at all feel, it's like we watched Totally Killer last year or whatever, and it's like they're poking fun at the era and they're trying to emulate it in like the most superficial and on the nose way, whereas this just transported you back to a time. I liken this, Brady, to a horror version of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Would you agree with that sentiment?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So
sorry, I think
no, it's okay.
A little lag there. I was going to say, especially most of it, it's taking place in Hollywood. So MaXXXine character and the other characters are going in and out of Hollywood lots in the studios. But that opening single tracking shot of her going like through the back entrance of the studio and the credits are rolling. Like I mean, that definitely felt like a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood scene. And I think you said it last night afterwards. It was, Ty West is kind of like very Tarantino-esque with his movies. And this just further showcases that.
Absolutely. Film purist, film historian, guy that just loves cinema of all genre,
Mhm.
especially genre stuff, the horror, the sci-fi, everything from our favorite era. So unfortunately, I mean, at our screening, there was a Q&A live streamed in from LA of Ty West after the movie. This screening didn't start till 9 p.m. So by the
And we
time the
live an
movie was
hour and a half
over,
away. Yeah.
and we had to drive an hour and a half, which we'll do for screenings for movies like
Mhm.
this. We'll sacrifice sleep and everything else in our lives, but I was like, as much as I wanted to stay, it just was not possible to do so. So we missed all of that, but apparently the Q&A was very good, and he talked a lot about his influences, which if you know anything about that era and you're a cinephile of the 80s, you can pretty much see where he was going with this. So
Oh, for sure. I mean, I was, not to cut you off, but you and I instantly caught on to the Body Double, right? Like,
oh, it's so
we're
reminiscent
we're
of
huge
Body
De Palma
Double.
fans, but the curtains casting shadows, or the foot steps going up the stairs, that you have, there's a kill in there, like we said, spoiler alert, where the black glove and the knife is going up and down, blood's going everywhere. It's great, definitely giallo. I was reading a couple interviews that he did, and I will be honest, I haven't seen a lot that he has done. I've seen a lot that Mia Goth has come out with, but Ty West did an interview where he said that he was channeling his inner, like, Paul Schrader for MaXXXine.
Sure.
And so he was saying, it's 80s Hollywood set horror, just as hardcore as Schrader's filmography, with high concept tie-ins of The Terminator and Vice Squad. Did you get any of that?
Well, Terminator, sure.
Maybe.
But Terminator definitely. The issue is with Terminator. I'll say this much: Terminator is gritty as fuck. It's a super low budget movie, and they didn't capture the grittiness of LA. They definitely captured the sleaze, I feel like, and the glitz, the facade of the glitz of Hollywood in the early 80s. Because again, this is 85. So at this point in 85, there have already been, if we're looking at real life, so many huge hits. 84 alone, a massive, like Beverly Hills Cop, Back to the Future, Gremlins. I mean, we had so many movies of that year, Ghostbusters as well, so many. So Hollywood was booming in 85. There were references to movies that had come out during that time, and I attempted my best to not nitpick, but I was looking at details, like they had a theater with a marquee and it had St. Elmo's Fire, which I knew came out in 85. I was like, okay, they're getting that right, but there were so many needle drops and so many amazing songs that played. I didn't sit there and write them all down or anything like that. So I would be interested to watch it again and look at all the songs and make sure that they all came out in 85 or prior, but I was more invested in just soaking myself into this world and sitting there trying to pick apart little details like that. But in terms of the era, it felt like the 80s. He just captured it, like I said, better than any movie in recent memory. So all of that was great. So getting into our initial thoughts on the movie itself and what he presented in terms of the third film, Brady, I'll let you have at it first, my friend.
Sure. Yeah. Like we've already kind of covered, great setting, Ty West, transports you to the 80s, and you feel like you're there. I love that we have been able to follow MaXXXine from X to this, and this takes place 10 years later. It's a different type of movie. So, coming out of the theater, I had to remind myself, okay, well, X was a 70s gritty slasher, and then Pearl was this completely different. And, Ty West has gone to say MaXXXine will be as different from X as Pearl was from X and X was from Pearl. Like, that's what I want it to be. And I think for some people, that could be a turnoff. For me, it wasn't. What really I left the theater feeling with was that was a really good movie, but it was right on the cusp of being a great movie, right? Like, there was just something that didn't grab me fully. It felt like everything was either rushed, or there wasn't enough development for me, or you could say the plot was a little too weak. I don't know what it was, but nothing grabbed me throughout the entire movie to be like, this is the movie like that you were waiting for. Everything felt almost like Blue Balls a little bit, right? Like, everything was like, okay, it's getting there, and then it's not. It's moving on to something else. And then by the time the third act rolled around, I was like, there's no way this is the end of the movie. And then it was. So for me, initial thoughts were, I think it's a great ending for MaXXXine and that character based on the trajectory that he set up for her. I do wish that there had been a little more payoff.
I would follow you lock and step with this. And we discussed this on the way back because we had a whole hour and a half, me, you, Faye, Danielle, we all just talked about it. And interestingly enough, a handful of people reached out to me today, what did you think? Or they mentioned what they thought about it. And we're all kind of very similar in terms of our reaction to the overall product that he presented. I hate to use that word, but really what it is, like the film overall, he's trying to convey something. And in terms of character, I really thought it worked. MaXXXine as a character, there's so much to delve into there. There's so much depth there, in terms of her presenting the trauma, or I should say her demons, the demons that follow her around in terms of Pearl and the actions that she made when she was on the farm, and that haunts her on a constant basis, that she's not been caught and she's living in fear constantly, but putting on this bold facade in order to move forward. She's a very strong character and she shows very little vulnerability, which I love. Extremely strong female character. There's moments where she feels frightened, but she never allows that to overly consume her to the point where she's weak. You know what I mean?
Right.
So Mia Goth, once again, and I wrote my blurb on and already tweeted that shit this morning, but I truly do believe that Mia Goth is a movie star. No pun intended, not trying to be super silly here.
She's a fucking sex symbol.
She's a fucking movie star. She really is. I really do believe that. I mean, her performance throughout this series has been absolutely just mind-bogglingly fantastic, and here she just continues that, based on what they allow her to do, what they give her to do. I just really like the character, and I think for West to give us a character that we know, I mean, she's a murderer, but I still believe that her actions are justified. And
she's sort of an anti-hero, right?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely an anti-hero. I mean, she believes her actions are justified. I think as an audience member, we also agree with that. So, I don't look at her as a criminal. She's just a badass. And I like that she's written as like this badass, bold character that's just going to go for what they want, go for the throat, and not give a shit what anyone else says or does. And that's what she does in this movie. There are moments where, she finds out that some of her friends or coworkers have been brutally slaughtered, and they basically are like, hey, we need your help to save the next girl before they get killed. And she mentioned something along the lines of, they should save themselves. I did. And I like that strength that she shows, even though within that strength there is her hiding that fear of her being haunted by her past. But the character stuff, fantastically done. Mia Goth, fantastic. And talking about the cast, which we have to talk about before I get into the stuff that did not work, we had Elizabeth Debicki as Elizabeth Bender, the film director that's making The Puritan 2, which is the fictional sequel to The Puritan, another fictional movie.
Which I wish was a real movie.
I wish was a real movie. We see scenes that West shot that he puts up on screen that are from the movie, and it looks fucking awesome. And they gave us, well, they didn't give us, I bought it, Alamo, at the screening. I'll hold it up to the audience even though they can't see it. These fake VHS case plastic clamshell for The Puritan 2. New Horizons Studios presents The Devil Has Come Back to Make Her Pay for Her Greatest Sin, the sin of living.
Yeah,
something bad has happened to Veronica Rutland. An ancient evil has awakened, forcing this perfect housewife to do terrible, awful, murderous things. The Puritan looks awesome.
For those who don't know who Elizabeth Debicki is, she played Princess Diana in The Crown.
There you go. She's also wonderful. We have Moses Sumney as Leon, who is MaXXXine's best buddy, who runs the video store that's underneath where she lives in her apartment.
Wouldn't it have been so cool to work there? God, that looks like a dream
Absolutely.
job.
I mean, dude, there's porn and there's horror movies, and that's what video stores used to be. I say that like it's a shocking thing, but very specifically, though, most of the video stores that I would go into as a kid, the porn section was, you know, behind those Western doors or a curtain to make it more mysterious, and also try to hide the kids away from it, where I would just like peek under the curtain and look, and oh, look, there's tits all over the place in there. But
I would just wait until it was 3:00 in the morning and Comedy Central showed a Girls Gone Wild commercial, but everything was edited out. So it was like, you know, they just had the huge logo over everything. And I was like, yeah, this is the life.
I remember, believe me, I was there too. But in the early days, the video store, God, I fucking miss it. And the accuracy of this scene too was just perfection. Yes. Loved it so much. Yeah. But I love that character a lot. We'll talk about his where he ends up, if you will,
his demise.
But the other, we have Giancarlo Esposito as Teddy Knight, who is MaXXXine's film agent in the adult film industry and for Z-list actors, and he was also fantastic in the movie. Love to see him popping up. He was just having a blast with that terrible wig they gave him.
So I was bad.
I felt like it had to be intentional. If you're considering the time frame in which the movie is basing this, 85, any low budget horror movie you'd see it due to the bad wig for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But I feel like the biggest standout for me is Kevin motherfucking Bacon as John Labatt, the private investigator who was searching for MaXXXine.
Dude, the fucking accent, man. And I know he's supposed to be from the Big Easy, but man, the minute that you meet him and he opens his mouth and shows those gold teeth and he has that almost like Southern Cajun drawl, I was
my
like,
client's a very powerful man. Yeah, I can't even do it. I can't even do it.
My client's a very powerful man.
I can't. There you go. You nailed it.
It's almost as bad as Halsey's New York accent being in Los Angeles.
Oh my God. Her accent was terrible.
I thought she was having a stroke while she was talking. That's how bad it was. I was like, are those words?
She plays Tabby Martin. She's just I wouldn't say just she's a porn star, but what I meant to say, I'll elaborate. She's just in the movie for like one scene and then one or two scenes. She's in the movie for less than 5 minutes. So that's what I meant to say. Yeah. I didn't mean to say she's just a porn star. Nothing against sex workers. You know,
well, we don't know if she was a porn star. She was a sex worker. I thought she was a stripper.
Sex worker, porn star. I was under the impression that, because we know MaXXXine does porn films, and she also works at the Peep Show at the strip club. So I was under the impression they both did both things because they knew each other and they had the same agent and all that stuff. But I'm just speculating. I'm just making shit up for this.
We don't actually know Tabby Martin's background, ladies and gentlemen.
But she was going to a hot party, and that ended up not being very hot for her. In fact, it was pretty hot. Pretty cold and calculated murder. Getting to the frightening aspects of the movie, one of my favorite scenes in this movie, and you and I are true crime guys. We don't talk about it on the show a lot, but in terms of the serial killers and the history of them and all the documentaries and all the literature, we kind of know our shit a little bit. Anytime there's a new documentary about John Wayne Gacy or Ted Bundy or Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, in which his inclusion is in this movie, we'll watch that shit. So I thought it was an interesting thing to have the Night Stalker as a background for the movie, even though, spoiler alert, you and I both knew from the beginning that the Night Stalker was not going to be doing the killing in this story at all whatsoever. Not in terms of the ones that we're seeing. I mean, the killings are referenced in news briefs and such, but not at the forefront.
No, I mean, I don't think it was supposed to be a very strong red herring. I think it was just, again, another thing to put you in a time and place, give you this sense of dread, what's going on around, like why people shouldn't be out at night. Like, and Ty West laces the movie with news briefings and a news anchor who pops up every, act to be like, all right, well, like they found more bodies. They think it might be the Night Stalker. And then even the cops are, investigating Tabby and body when they find her, and they're like, well, and one of the cops is like, we think it's the Night Stalker, and they're like, well, you'd like that, wouldn't you? So it does go to show that at that time in the 80s, the Night Stalker was a huge and prevalent figure in LA. Like, everybody was thinking about it because you never knew if he was going to come into your house or not. But yeah, he instantly, you knew he was not going to be the one who MaXXXine would face at the end.
Absolutely not. And I liked the aspect of including the Night Stalker. Why the fuck not? And since it's Hollywood, LA in 1985, everyone was paying attention. It was on everyone's mind. So the fact that everyone had the TV on and you would see it all the time was real life. That was just what you were doing. And that heightened fright of just not knowing if you should go out at night and all that stuff, that really played right into what we have in the movie.
Well, what you have too is, not just Richard Ramirez as the Night Stalker, but you have, the movie begins with clips of real life, Wasp and Dee Snider going to testify about music.
The Satanic Panic!
Interviews with moms who are like, my kid was listening to this album, and then we found out that Ozzy Osbourne was on there. It's like, so, it was a very different time than we can imagine now. But I think it all just plays into really immersing the audience in what was going on at the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And I loved every single second of all of that. I mean, even when we see MaXXXine show up for her audition in the opening of the movie, when she leaves, there's like tons of protesters out there protesting the making of the sequel, The Puritan 2, just because. And that was a thing back then. I mean, I'll never forget, if you look at those iconic photos from 1984 from Silent Night, Deadly Night, there were moms out there picketing the movie, just because there was a killer Santa Claus in it. That was a thing back then, where people would go picket fucking movies, and they would stand outside studios and movie theaters, and sometimes they were effective. Other times they just look like a bunch of fucking idiots out there. But that was definitely a thing, and I really enjoyed that aspect of the movie as well. The killings and such. So I have to say, going into this, the trailer definitely makes you think it's going to be much more slasher forward, maybe even more giallo inspired, but it's really not. It really does, pull from Brian De Palma in terms of, yes, there's some gruesome shit, there's some super brutal stuff in the movie, but it's not X in terms of that level of slash and stalk. Really not at all. And early on, we get a really fantastic stalk and attempt to slash sequence where MaXXXine's leaving work, and we have a guy dressed up in what looked like, I forget what they're called.
Charlie Chaplin.
Like a Charlie Chaplin.
Like a mime kind of thing.
Cosplayer type thing or whatever. It reminded me so much of the movie Fade to Black.
This
movie definitely has some resemblance to that in a lot of ways. But, she's getting stalked, and you just see the silhouette of this guy with that Chaplin hat, and then he pulls out a switchblade. Fantastically done. I mean, the lighting in those scenes and the way it was shot made me feel like Billy Lustig's Maniac a lot. I just really loved how that felt. And then, of course, he doesn't know who he's fucking with in regards to MaXXXine. And dude, this scene.
Oh my God. This is probably the first scene in the movie that really makes you look at each other and go, wow. Like, I looked at Justin and I was like, holy shit. Like, I just could not believe that they did it. Like, it's all building up to what you think she's going to do, and then completely subverts it. But she does something just as disgusting.
I'll say this much, because I really don't want to totally spoil this one for people. But you think getting kicked in the nuts is bad? You think just, hitting them against a railing is bad? Accidentally flicking them?
Yeah, you think like when you're folding a towel and you go to like fold that third one down, you just like smack yourself in the nuts like this. Yeah, just...
You think that's bad? No, not at all. I mean, MaXXXine is an absolute beast in this scene, and just goes to show and just reinforces that, like, you don't fuck with this character at all. Like, you can't really do much. But so from then on, we find out MaXXXine gets the role in The Puritan 2. We see her audition right in the beginning. Anyone that's seen the trailer has already seen, the presentation of that audition. So you can kind of lead yourself to believe, oh, she's going to get the role in the movie. You can tell by watching the trailer. She gets the role in the movie. And as she's prepping to be in the movie, we have this private investigator played by Kevin Bacon, who's just basically chasing her around, has her meet him at a lunch. And I forget what the building is. Very historic in terms of the 1980s. But then he's like letting her know, like, we know what you've done. We're aware of it. My client wants to meet you. And she's having none of it. She doesn't give a shit. So he's just basically chasing her around to the point where she has to go to her agent and be like, listen, this guy's fucking with me. I just got this role. I mean, dude, one of the funniest scenes in the movie, and I was literally laughing out loud in the theater, was when she's on the set, prepping to be in the movie, just like watching stuff, watching the other actors, and Kevin Bacon shows up, and they're in a Western area, like a Western town. And they do like a standoff, and he like pulls his coat open and shows he has a gun. And then she just starts running, and then it's like a chase scene, but it's done almost like a comedy where it's pretty funny. I don't know if you got that too, but
oh, I did too. Yeah, I was definitely like, oh, what is this? Like a duel?
It almost felt like a fucking Three Stooges bit or something, where it's just like,
and the way that Kevin Bacon's character runs is like this like haphazard, like bow-legged run, like it's over the top.
It's so goofy.
And then what's even better about it is that it leads up to the fucking prop Bates hotel and house.
Yes.
And, we talked about it last night. I was hoping for a little more when they go in the house. But then it is what it is. It's just a fucking prop house. But
which it is, which it always has been. Yeah.
Yeah. And I loved that inclusion of it. I love how MaXXXine too, like you were saying, Justin, like she's been the same character we saw her in X, just heightened, right? Like she's got so much more confidence, so much more endurance. And like the scene where she comes out of the audition and she just like screams at all the girls waiting. She's like, just go fucking home. Like I already got the part.
Oh, so and then that's okay. So not to go backwards or anything or cut you off. That's one of my favorite scenes in the fucking movie, because then she struts out in front of him, gets into her Mercedes convertible, and then just drives off. And you see, MaXXXine is on the license plate, and you're just like, the music kicks in and you're like, fuck yeah.
But going back to the Kevin Bacon stuff, they sent her this tape where it's the police evidence, which is a video of the porn they were shooting Farmer's Daughter from X. And so MaXXXine realizes that somebody knows what's happened, and then while she's getting this tape, her friends are getting killed. So Tabby's getting killed. And then her friend at the video store, he gets killed. And I gotta say,
that sequence,
this is when Ty West talks about how he wanted to make a giallo, and it was heavily influenced by that. This is the scene, as he's closing the door, in a very funny scene, you can see this shape in the back who has the top hat, the coat pulled up, face you can't see because it's in the black. And he grabs a knife, like a K-bar knife, and just slides it across the back of his neck. And it's incredible.
Man, it made my spine tingle. It definitely gave me goosebumps and made me cringe a little bit, because the back of your neck, you don't see that a lot. And then, of course, everything in this sequence, in terms of the close-ups and the way it was shot and the lighting, pure giallo. I'm glad we got a little bit of giallo in the movie. And when I mentioned Brian De Palma influence in the movie a lot, people don't realize as much that when De Palma was doing his thrillers, that they're definitely inspired by giallos, because giallos were inspired by Hitchcock. So in a sense, they're all kind of in the same. I mean, giallos are over stylized intentionally, which is why I love them so much. Hitchcock didn't do that level of stylizing his work, but so that's why I like that they're kind of like in the same realm, and so they're a perfect mix together. We get a little bit of giallo also when she's at the peep show, which is one of my favorite scenes, which came before all this, when she's just there working and she's dancing. She's got her other persona. She's got the wig on, and we see this figure with the hat and the leather gloves, which was essential to a giallo, just like gripping the barrier in front of the glass and just like rips the thing off the wall. Just love that frustration. That's something that's just very integral to that genre, which I was happy to see included here. But that kill scene, I actually felt so bad for Leon because I loved that character so much. I'm like,
he was a good friend.
Yeah, good friend, skateboarder, supportive, liked metal, was
horror.
the video store worker, knew horror, like just super chill, nice dude. And I was like, and the only guy that didn't want to fuck MaXXXine would just be there as a friend. And I just felt that's like one of the only times in the movie I was like, oh, I don't want to see that character get killed. So
but you knew he was going to.
You knew because he's nice guys finish last, like you said.
Yeah,
every nice guy in a horror movie, they have to die.
Yeah, and just to move it along, because like I was saying, the movie's lean, but it also it lacks a lot of substance in parts, and I think this is like you have these killings of friends, and it's just to move it along to get where we're going, which there's an argument that that's what the 80s movies did, but anyways, so eventually we get to this part where Leon's dead. The cops are frustrated with MaXXXine,
which we have to talk about those cops and who they're played by. Michelle Monaghan plays Detective Williams, and Bobby Cannavale plays Detective Torres, who is a standout in the movie. I feel like, aside from Kevin Bacon, most of
his character is the guy who was an aspiring actor, and he never made it. So every confrontation he has with MaXXXine,
he's trying to put on like the fake cop. He's trying to be like the tough guy, good cop, bad cop thing, but he's the bad cop. And his partner's like getting so annoyed. She's like, shut the fuck up. Like,
you fucked that one up. He's like, what? You didn't like that performance?
And she's like, I see why you never made it as an actor. And it's hilarious. But I think the comedy relief, and I liked that it had that levity to it where there's moments of humor throughout the movie where you can just kind of laugh and let go of it. Because it is pretty heavy shit when it comes down to it. But at the same time, there is that almost camp value to it. Because when you look at the reaction the public had to like the satanic panic and the metal music and all that, it was all fucking silly in retrospect. It's extremely silly because none of it did anything. But I will, piggyback off you, and I'll agree that the movie, I don't know what it is, man. And it's been less than 24 hours since we've seen it. I still can't put my finger on it. I didn't have this feeling with Pearl or X. I walked out feeling enamored by them, and this sense of energy in my body where I couldn't wait to go back and see them again. And I will be giving MaXXXine a second shot in theaters. I'm not saying that I'm not going to, but I didn't leave feeling that I wanted to go back and watch it again. I left feeling like I wanted more from what I saw the first time. And I just, it's weird because maybe with another watch, I'll be able to contemplate and decipher what that is that's missing for me. But we get to the point where MaXXXine is being hounded by the police. These people she knows are dying. Prior to that, though, we have to discuss one of the best scenes in the movie, which is when she goes to see her agent, and Teddy's like, we'll take care of this guy. This fucking PI that's following you around. She gets all made up, and I love the split screen in the movie. Mm-hmm. You're talking about De Palma-esque. They use the split screen like 20 times in the movie. God bless Ty West for doing that, because no one does it anymore. But the nightclub scene, we even get Frankie Goes to Hollywood Relax, which is in Body Double, and it's a different rendition, but it's there. She's dancing, and then of course they're able to take out the PI, and that scene is probably one of the most gruesome in the movie.
Yeah, no, it's I almost didn't think it was going to happen until it's finished. And you're like, okay, well, that happened, because I thought they were going to pull back.
Yeah, I thought it was going to pull back too. I definitely didn't think it was going to go through with it at all.
Yeah. And so, going back to what you were saying, like you get to this part. So there are things in here to like. There's great practical effects. There's great character development. There's some really good kills. But, I still felt at this point, we weren't there, but I was like, well, maybe the end's going to be good. However, spoiler alert, if you remember all of X, you know what's going to happen. It's pretty easy to figure out who is the masked killer.
Or you would like to consider that
you don't want it to be that.
You think it could be, but you don't want it to be that. You really want to be surprised.
MaXXXine eventually, through the people dying, like her girlfriends, they all have this thing in common where they're like, I'm going up to the hills to see this fancy producer at a party. So then Molly, who is the Puritan from the Puritan won the star, she says it to MaXXXine. MaXXXine's like, all right. So she ends up going to the address. And when she gets there, the big reveal is that it is her father is the killer. Her father, who is the religious preacher, the zealot who is in X. If you remember, he's the preacher that's on the TV station in the gas station. He's on the TV in Pearl's house and Howard's house. That's on the TV where they're talking about, my daughter was stolen, blah, blah, blah. He's assembled this group who are the protesters at the studio, who all have had their children, quote unquote, run away and become Satanists, right? They've embraced the world. They've embraced drugs, sex, and rock and roll. So now he's been trying to get back to MaXXXine, and he's taking people close to her to try to save them, but when they refuse to do it, he kills them. So now he's got MaXXXine, and he ties her up, and he's going to perform a recorded exorcism.
The build up to that, though, I have to stop. The build up to that is fantastic, but
sure, and Molly being cut up in a suitcase is fantastic. Who's also Phil Collins' daughter. So
yeah, that's right.
I thought that was really great.
I liked. What's weird is the Kevin Bacon PI character, he gets offed, and then she goes home, she takes a shower, she looks at the TV, it's talking about all the people dying, and then she just decides to grab her gun and then go up to the address in which she received an invite to earlier on in the movie to meet this client of his to resolve the issue. She's like, fuck it, I'm going to go up there. What I love about this, if we're going to talk about Body Double, we're going to talk about De Palma-esque, is the chemosphere from Body Double, which is a huge spaceship-looking house that's up on the Hollywood Hills that overlooks the valley of Los Angeles. He harkens back to that here. She has to ride the little cart with the little lights up to the house, and we don't see the entirety of the house, but damn it, Brady, you tell me if I'm right or not, if that was not a direct fucking homage to Body Double.
There's no way it wasn't. The house on the hill, the car going up there, yeah, it was all pulled as an homage.
So I just had to mention that. So when she goes into the house, this does add a little bit of tension that I didn't feel as much throughout the rest of the movie. It's there in spurts, but it's not like a heavy sense of tension throughout the movie. And here you're like, oh, what's going to happen? And when we get to the point where we get that reveal that you were just leading up to and it's there, that's when I feel like any sense of disbelief, or I should say excitement for a reveal, just kind of just throws itself into the toilet and flushes itself. I don't know how else to explain it or describe it, I should say. It was like, oh, this is what we're doing. Okay, so we are doing this.
Well, there are sometimes a movie can be so simplistic with the reveal where you're like, cool, that makes sense. I don't need this to be this convoluted thing. And so,
sure.
if you backtrack and think about this, X is a story of Mia Goth's character MaXXXine running away from home, becoming somebody who's getting involved in amateur porn, trying to become a star. She can't talk about what happened there, even though she didn't do anything wrong, because of her past, and she was a runaway, right? She's young in X. And now 10 years on, she's made a name for herself, and her dad has come looking for her. Like, it all makes sense on paper. There's nothing about it that's unbelievable. It's just lackluster. And I like, when her dad is introduced, I like his performance in the movie where he's trying to perform this exorcism, and that outrageous 80s shootout when the cops show up is great.
Oh, it's amazing. The shootout is fantastic.
But the reveal is just like that. That's what I would describe it as. You're here and you're like, Oh, all right. Like that was how I felt.
You're already. I feel like here's the thing that West feels like he already had you for that long leading up to it, so now he's already got you by the
Right.
balls. He can do whatever he wants with you. But in this circumstance, I really didn't think that it worked entirely for me. Um, not that it was badly done or anything. I think in
No.
terms of character, it makes sense for MaXXXine. She's already trying to face her past, and that's what the whole thing is about. She's being haunted by her past, which is literally one of the most generic and basic storylines for any character in the history of movie making and books, whatever you want to say. But it just felt a little too safe. It felt a
Well,
little bit too neat and clean for my liking.
and also going back to like just looking at it, how it's written and those characters being involved, what else is he going to do? You really can't introduce anybody else into this to be the killer at the end of the third movie, right? Because everybody from X is pretty much dead except MaXXXine.
It
Um,
should have been Corey as a seaman, as a from Halloween.
yeah, okay.
Halloween ends.
I should have popped in there.
That's right. Yeah, you, because
But
you're
so
Corey's
it
doppelganger.
makes sense. But yeah, I don't know if it was just the absurdity of a satanic panic and how it got to that level, right? And maybe it's because you and I weren't really, we weren't alive going through the satanic panic. We weren't there for the fervor. We've only seen it secondhand or on film.
I
But
was born in '83, so
you did not go through the satanic.
I didn't go through it, but I was alive during it. Damn it! So you can't say shit. I was probably in a crib somewhere, and someone tried to hand me a pamphlet for Satanism with a Twisted Sister record.
I was not even a speckle in my father's eye. But yeah, so and I don't want to convey that this was a bad movie in any way.
Definitely not.
Because it was not. It felt like it's like he hit it so close to the nail, like right on the head, but just missed. And it's like, I just wanted something else, and I can't. Shame on me because I can't describe what else I would have wanted that would have made sense. But it's a feeling, I don't feel like it was there.
There's a sense of expectation versus reality, and reviewing movies, being a film critic, being a podcast film critic, whatever you want to call us, or just a basic regular fan that goes to see these movies, and you see the trailer and you are pulled in by it, and you can't wait to see it, and you think it's one thing based on how it's marketed to you, and then you go see it, and if it's not exactly how you imagine it in your mind, you may not totally enjoy it in the same way you would if you just went into it cold. There are some of our friends and some of our listeners and followers that don't watch trailers just for that simple reason. They don't want to be influenced by anything. But I realized halfway through what the movie was, and it wasn't what I initially expected it to be. And I just went along for the ride, and I still think it was a pretty damn good movie. I don't think it was a great movie, and I don't think it was on the level of Pearl or X. But if we're talking about trilogies here, this is kind of common. I mean, actually, it is common. It's an expectation that at least one movie out of three is going to be the weaker of the three. I mean, I said it earlier in the show, depending on your traction with Pearl, some people already felt like that was going to be the one for them because, it's old time movie and it's Technicolor looking and feels like, I don't like old movies. I only like anything from the 70s on or the 80s on. And I get it. If that's your thing, totally. Go watch more movies. But in this case, this just overall as a movie doesn't stand up to the other two in the same way. Character-wise, on paper, in terms of dialogue and the writing and such, it's very good, but just how it's executed, it feels like, I said it earlier, everything is just tied up with a bow so neat and clean in what's supposed to be like this really dingy video nasty, which is kind of ironic, and it doesn't make any sense to me that you would have that kind of movie end that way. It feels safe when those movies never should end safe.
Yeah, but again,
if that makes any sense.
It does. No, like I don't know off the top of my head a video nasty that I can be like, oh, that was a nice bow on the ending. But I do know a ton of 80s movies that do end that way. And so I think that
absolutely,
if you look at it through that way, like that's what it was. Like through and through, this is an 80s action thriller. Like that's what it is.
Well, that's true. And if you look at Body Double, we're going to keep talking about it. So those that haven't seen Body Double, this will be a spoiler for you. So you don't need to now, but you know how Body Double ends, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Our main character gets the role back that he lost at the beginning of the movie, and he's successful. He's overcome all the issues that he's dealing with in the movie, and then the movie ends and he's making that movie.
Yep. Yeah, and that's what this is. MaXXXine gets what she wants out of life. Like she, as she says, does not accept a life she does not deserve. And that has gotten her here, through lying, through murder, through hiding and sneaking around. But she's
stepping all over anyone that comes into her way in order to make it happen.
And you know what? You root for her. You want her.
Absolutely.
You want that for her.
You do. Yeah.
So yeah, it does feel. And again, I think for me personally, I was thinking of this too. Is I look at X in this one, right? So X was so gritty, does not leave you feeling good. Like sure, MaXXXine survives, but everybody else is just it's sad and terrifying. This one, you don't really have that. She's almost so detached from these other characters that are getting killed because she's insulated herself to only watch out for herself. So then when the ending is, hey, she watched out for herself and she, 1, survived, and 2, has found success. Yeah, that makes sense. And now
she's a fucking movie star.
She's a fucking movie star. So, I mean, I don't know what else I would have wanted from her. She's not going to die. I wouldn't have wanted her to die. I would not have wanted her to get caught for anything that happened in X. So yeah, this makes sense. But again, it's one of those things where it's like, it feels like there should have been something more.
Yeah.
I feel like she needed a bigger send-off, but what send-off do you get?
Well, the ending is pretty epic when you look at it. The whole climax at the Hollywood sign and her facing her biggest fear, the biggest part of her past that led her on her journey. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense thematically, and it was very well done. But then when she completes this transaction, if you will, it's like, okay, this is where I expected it to go. Then it goes there, then it ends. And then I went, okay, that's what it is. Now, again, the movie is short. Not that the other two were super long or anything. It's only 104 minutes. So it could have been a touch longer and given me another stalk and slash scene. And here I'm just being nitpicky, saying what more I could have seen out of it. Just knowing Ty West is doing that 1985 era of everything. There's so much more he could have done. Again, that's me being a fan going, oh man, he could have done this, he could have done that, rather than viewing the movie for what it is and what he wanted to do with it. He still did a fucking bang up job, man. He still made a run on the field. It just wasn't a home run. It was just, he still scored here, but it was not, it's a base hit. It's a good movie. It's a solid movie. It's still better than a lot of other stuff we see out there. But I think that's where we have to, recommend having expectations in check. And I hate doing that, but I think a lot of people are going to go into this expecting the same level of what they saw in the last two, and not saying it's not there throughout. There's parts where there is absolute genius on the screen. It's just not all the way there. And unfortunately, that's what MaXXXine is. But still, Ty West is one of the best filmmakers in the genre today. I mean, absolutely nailed the decade, the music, fucking those needle drops, man. Usually I complain about it. No, not here. Every single one of them. I welcomed it and said, bring it on. Keep giving me more 80s music. Every one of those songs just fit each scene, and being able to take downtown LA and wherever they shot these exterior scenes and make it look like the way it used to look, just, warmed my cold, dead heart. Just nailed all of that stuff. So I wouldn't say it's a mixed bag. I would say it was on its way to being a near masterpiece. It could have been there. It could have been at the same level as Pearl and X. It just didn't quite get there. But we're going to get to Trash It or Treasure It and final thoughts now, as if we haven't babbled on about this movie long enough. But
I was like, are we already there?
Well, I mean, just like the movie. We're already there?
Yeah,
already?
Right. We're here?
I mean,
right.
Well, we got to the end of the movie, so I mean, I don't know where else to go, Brady. Your final thoughts and Trash It or Treasure It, my friend.
Again, good movie. MaXXXine is a great character. Ty West did a great job of introducing characters throughout all three of these films that work with MaXXXine / Pearl, and further that story and along. Setting was great. The soundtrack was fantastic. The score, not so much, which was surprising.
I like Tyler Bates. I like him a lot. It didn't feel like it was present throughout most of it for me.
Yeah, it felt like the soundtrack and those needle drops took precedent, which is fine because it worked. But those moments where you do really want the score to be there, they just weren't. But yeah, I felt like this plot was probably the weakest out of all of them when you need it to be the strongest one, because it is giving you all this resolution. And I felt that even though you have a good ending for MaXXXine, which I'm not too complaining too much about, it was all just so rushed. There wasn't enough going on to develop it and really give her the send-off I think she deserved. That being said, I will watch this again, no problem. I will watch all three movies, no problem, back to back to back. And I think everybody should go see it. And, to your point about the trailer, I don't think that the trailer gives any unnecessary expectations. I think when you have a trilogy like this that has come out so quickly, he did X and Pearl released in the same year, and now this one, there's that excitement around it, that anticipation. And I think all that goes into an expectation. However, this isn't your typical trilogy, right? So this is X, which then went into Pearl, they're two fucking
and Pearl movies. Came out second, which is a prequel.
Right. So you're going all around.
You're jumping all the way the fuck around.
Also, conceptually and thematically, you're going all over the place. So it's really hard to track where this is going to go, but we all still assign our expectations to it. So that being said, it is definitely a treasure for me. My first no problem treasuring of this year. So in that regard, it did not disappoint. What about you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's going to be a treasure. Absolutely. There's no way I could say trash this. There's so much to love in the movie, and we've already gone through almost all of it. I'm sure this is going to be one that I might revisit in terms of another episode way later on down the line, maybe a couple of years later. You never know. I think there's so much there where you can dissect it. There's a lot of stuff in there. I mean, I have to mention that there was a Charlie Bronson reference to Charles Bronson, who was out there making all of his canon, all of his canon movies at that time, which were similar, just much sleazier than this. And love that reference. We saw a New Coke show up in the movie, like tons of pop culture stuff that showed up. It wasn't on the nose. It wasn't too harsh or made you groan or anything like that, but I liked all of those elements in the movie, so I was happy about that. There were a couple of billboards that I remembered from last night, but I forgot now, but they were billboards of things that I was like, yes, I know that, and I want to mention that, but who knows? My memory is shit. So yeah, I've said everything I've had to say about the movie. Go see it. I liked it a lot. Didn't love it. Can't say it's great, but I'd say it's pretty good. Yeah,
pretty.
It's not a Larry David. It's not one of those. It's a pretty good. It's a good movie. Go see it. I'm treasuring it. And ladies and gentlemen, that's it for our review of MaXXXine. If it's your first time listening, thanks for checking us out. If you're a veteran listener of the Epic Film Guys, we love you so much. Thanks for sticking with us. We're all over social media at Epic Film Guys on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, even sometimes TikTok. And we're at every single podcast platform known to man. And as always, like we just love you and we appreciate your support. We have as much as we can do to give you more content the rest of the summer. Plenty of awesome shit coming out, like Brady already said earlier in the show. The new Quiet Place. We have fucking Long Legs. We have Alien Romulus. We have so much cool stuff coming out that we can't wait to cover. So hope you're as excited as we are. But as they always like to say, hey, I'm Justin.
I'm Be Ready.
And we always ask you to keep it creepy.